Okay, this is going to be part 27 of Rebel, but first a little housekeeping things. The feels like today in where I am is 108 degrees. And for those of you that might live somewhere else, you'll be like, oh, it's 120 outside right now. But I also live in a place where the feels like low this winter was -20. So, I'm not used to this weather. I have a little fan going. Hopefully you can't hear that too badly. But if I start sweating, if I need to drink water, please just give me a little bit of grace because I am trying. And then secondly, please before we start this video, just make sure that you are subscribed, like it. It does help out more than you will ever know. Okay, Eden. I've never seen Ross City without its layers of augmented reality before. I don't think it was ever meant to seem this way. There are no signs or street names, no hovering messages, no grid lines. Most of all, there are no levels over anyone's head. It is as if everything that holds a city together, streetlights, traffic laws, police enforcement, has vanished in the blink of an eye. Riots are triggered so quickly that from the AIS headquarters in the sky floors, we can see the chaos happening in real time on their screens. At first, people stand around out on sidewalks puzzled, muttering to one another as they ask others if their levels had suddenly vanished. Auto cars and truck stops in the middle of the roads. The traffic starts to pile up. Slowly, I see the realization start to hit the Undercity. It ripples through the streets in a wave. Murmurs turn into exclamations and then into shouts. The system is down. The levels are gone. And just like that, the ripple becomes a tidal wave. The system is down. The levels are gone. The system is down. The levels are gone. After the scene in the Undercity, the sky floors seem eerily quiet. It's midnight now, and even though we're at least 100 floors high, I can see the orange glow of fire coming from the Undercity far below. Smoke rises in plumes as the city brings in the military to try to contain the chaos. Even the AIS headquarters itself is struggling to stay operational, running on limited backup power. Here in the main lobby, a large screen plays live footage from the Undercity as a newscaster talks rapidly over the scene. It's weird to see video like this without our level systems in place. Why would Han just let you go? Daniel asked me as I paced restlessly by the windows. Did he hurt you? No, I replied distractedly. I'm trying to place a call manually on a phone to Cressa, but nothing's getting through. On my dozenth try, I swear under my breath and turn to my brother. He didn't do anything to me, I reply. He told me that he would release you if I helped him install my drone's engine into his machine. And then, I hesitate, wondering whether I should tell Daniel about Han's history. My eyes go to my brother's bandaged finger. Han had promised he wouldn't hurt Daniel at all, but his promise had only been partly true. Daniel was apparently hospitalized for dehydration. The guards broke one of his fingers. Because of me, he'd hurt my brother. The thought makes me so sick to my stomach that I have to pause for a moment to fight down the nausea. After I finished installing the engine, I say, Han told me that he would let me go as a gesture of goodwill, but he said that I'd be back. He knew fundamentally that Daniel and I would find ourselves at a crossroads again, that I'm not like my brother. Daniel frowns at me. It makes no sense, he mutters. Han said he has no interest in forcing me to work for him. Besides, he's already got what he wanted. I turn back to the windows, where we can see plumes of smoke rising from the streets below. Daniel narrows his eyes at me. He's playing a game with you, he finally says. It's what he's known for. I've seen several cases of him winning over lone victims by giving them the illusion of safety with him. Something about the way Daniel just assumes that Han's playing a game with me makes me feel weary. It's true that he's a dangerous man. He kidnapped us both after all and held us hostage. Just the fact that he let us go on a whim, well, it's something only a competent criminal would do. But I can't help thinking about what he'd said to me, what happened to his son and wife, the genuine grief that had been etched onto his face, the way he seemed to know exactly what was going on in my mind, better even than what Daniel knew. The call I'm trying to place fails again. I grit my teeth in frustration and toss the phone onto a nearby couch. Then I turn to look at the elevators heading out to the AIS headquarters. You're not going down there, Daniel says automatically as he watches me. I have to, I reply. I can't call through to Cressa at all. If the AIS headquarters is this stripped down in terms of tech, The Undercity is probably completely cut off. Daniel's lips tighten. No. He nods at the screen where they're showing the streets down below. Barricades have been put up in some parts of the Undercity, but they're doing little to stop people from hopping over them and organizing into furious crowds. Some are marching down the streets, shouting. Others are breaking windows and flooding into shops. See that? He says, glancing sternly at me. The president himself is flying out tomorrow for his safety, and is taking his security detail with him. Andon has offered to host him in the Republic, June finishes. He has invited us to evacuate with him, too. Even the president's leaving us behind. The thought of us all flying out sends fear rippling through me. What about Pressa and her father? I can't just leave them here and run like a coward. And even then, tomorrow is far away. Daniel's heading down to the Undercity in a few hours with the rest of AIS to get things under control. I turn determined eyes on my brother. Isn't your shift next, down in the Undercity? It's my job to contain this mess, he replies. Your job. Always your job. I throw up my hands. You think I don't worry about what'll happen to you every time you head out into that? You put yourself in danger's way every day, but you won't let me in. You won't let me join you. I do it so that you don't have to, he snaps. I have to, I suddenly burst out. The anger burns in my throat. When you head out there and don't come home until late, when you're captured by a dangerous criminal, I have to deal with it. I have to bear the idea of losing you. You can't let me just leave Pressa to fend for herself down there. That's not what you would do. I take a deep breath and glare at him. If June were down there, you would tear every street in the Undercity apart to find her. You would keep going until you were dead, and you wouldn't care what the hell I said. June clears her throat uncomfortably at my words. Across from me, Daniel is quiet. His face has turned pale, as if he's remembering something from his past. It's going to get worse down there, June says after a while. I can't tell if she's siding with me or not. People who have suffered for that long, who don't have the ability to attack higher powers, turn on one another instead. They'll destroy every shop and stall and home down there, and they'll do it quickly. So if we're going to get anyone out of the Undercity, we have to do it now. It's about to become impassable. Daniel's gaze goes from me back to the dark windows. When he finally speaks, his voice is pulled tight. Fine, but you're not going alone. I'm coming with you. Same, June says. Even with this compromise, I can feel the chasm widening between us. No matter what Daniel says, he makes me feel small, like a little brother asking for permission to do anything and everything. I turn away, disgusted with myself, and start heading toward the elevators. Even though it's past midnight, the streets of the Undercity are fully lit tonight, with lights from the backup electric system, with handheld lamps, glow sticks, torches, and portable screens held up by protesters, and with floodlights set up along the street's barricades, monitored by police and soldiers alike. Now I run through the streets with Daniel and June at my side. Shouts come at us from all directions. The streets, always narrow, are crammed full of people in every form of celebration and confusion. Some are uncertain, standing outside the front of their stalls or shops and wringing their hands, looking meekly at the police that rush by. Others hang out the open windows of the floors above, squinting at the buildings in disbelief at the lack of any augmented layering. Others take photos with old-school cameras, now that their systems are disabled. Still others are furious, delighted to unleash their anger by attacking their neighbors with the kind of violence that normally get your levels flattened. There are some taking advantage of the system's disappearance to break into shops and stock up on all the things they've never been able to buy. We pass several young people who are simply wrecking the street for no reason, crushing scooters and boards and autobuses and spraying them with buckets of paint. In the night, their figures cast long shadows against the wall. Things are deteriorating quickly, June calls to us as we run. Eden, we won't have long before the situation makes it unreasonable for us to stay down here. Can we get your friend before that? Pressa. Her name rings through me over and over. Her father's apothecary is deep in the heart of the Undercity, right in the thick of everything. We'll reach her, I call back, as we hit an intersection and take a sharp turn. We have to. A flipped auto car in the street stops us dead in our tracks. People have already crowded around it so tightly that there's no easy way around it. Nearby, flames burn gold against the night. I spit out a curse. We can't get through, I say. Daniel looks overhead and nods for me to follow. There's a way, he replies. He reaches the end of the street and then darts into a narrow alley between 2 blocks. His movements are steady and sure, like he's been down these roads a dozen times before. We hit a dead end stopped by a locked gate, but Daniel doesn't stop moving. He kicks off against the wall and shimmies up to the second floor in a matter of seconds, then leaps off the ledge to climb onto the top of the gate. He drops out of sight. June runs up to the gate right as Daniel emerges from the other side of it, opening the gate from the inside. "Hurry," he gasps as he ushers us through. We dart down a private walkway before emerging back out into the streets. 2 blocks down, I see it, the apothecary. There's a mob of people that have surrounded the shop, and the front window is already smashed. Standing in the entrance is Press's father, his frail body gamely pressed in the doorway as he pleads with the people to keep order. Beside him, Pressa and her father's assistant, Marin, are shoving back anyone who gets too aggressive. "Get away," she shouts. "Get back in the street. You can't come in here." There are others trying to help them too. I recognize a few of the store's frequent customers. Several of the larger men have formed a human barricade on one side of the shop, while 2 others are boarding up the broken window on the other side. My heart lifts a little at the sight, even though the situation looks like it's about to tip over into something dangerous. "Pressa!" I shout at the top of my lungs as we approach. My hands wave high in the air. Her head whips around in my direction, and her dark eyes search the crowd for me. They finally settle on where we are. "Eden?" she says incredulously. Her entire demeanor brightens at the sight of me. I don't hesitate. I just start pushing through the crowd to reach where she's standing with her dad. She grabs my arm in a vice-like grip. Her eyes are wide and frantic. "Everything's falling apart," she tells me in a rush. "People are trying to steal our medicine." Behind me, Daniel and June have pushed their way up to the top of the steps, too. When one man trying to get into the shop suddenly shoves Press's dad, June whips out an elbow so fast that she breaks the man's nose before he can even react. He cries out in pain and shrieks back. June narrows her eyes at him and raises her voice at the crowd. "Police!" she shouts. "Get back, now!" The authority in her voice is so militaristic that, at least for the moment, everyone listens. Beside her, Daniel shoves 2 people away from the entrance. I turn back to Pressa. "You and your dad have to get out of here," I say. "Leave the shop. Dominic Hahn destroyed the level system. It's not coming back up anytime soon. This situation's going to boil over." Pressa looks desperately to where her father is standing guard at the entrance. "There's no way in hell we're leaving," she replies. "I can't just let him stay behind, and he's not going to give up on his entire life's work." I grit my teeth and start pulling her with me. "Do you get how dangerous this is?" I urge her. "I'm talking about your lives here." She yanks herself out of my grip. Her eyes flash with anger and fear. "You think I'm stupid?" she snaps. "This is everything we have, Eden. Everything. It's a shop, Pressa, not your lives. This shop is something that Dad has built all his life. It's all that keeps us from being homeless. He's not going to run, so I'm not going to leave his side." She gives me a bitter glare. Not that I expect a skyboy like you to understand. I release her arm and she goes hurrying back to her father. Mr. Yu's now pleading with the people who are trying to shove their way past him. "Please," he calls out. "I've known many of you for years." But the hunger and chaos is building to a breaking point. I see 2 men suddenly crash through one of the side windows. They stumble into the shop, then start dumping any and every herb and canister they can find into a bag. Others start stepping in. I curse at the sight. Daniel's struggling to keep the tide of people from entering through the broken side window, while June stands determined at the front entrance. I shove back a woman clawing her way through another open window. Pressa shields her father, and together with Marin they pull him back. Her father, sobbing now, rivulets run down his face as he tries in vain to tell people to stop taking his medicines. "Please," he calls over and over again, grabbing a passing sleeve and arm and pant leg wherever he can. "Stop, please." This is going to go wrong. The thought amplifies it until it becomes a scream in my head. My heartbeat speeds up until I think it's going to explode. It's the feeling of being tied down in a gurney in these seconds right before a soldier shoots my mother. This is going to go very, very wrong. I see it happen in slow motion. A young, bone-thin man with hollow cheeks makes a beeline toward the shop's entrance, trying to pass underneath Mr. Yu's outstretched arms. He stumbles in his rush, falls, and hits his head hard against the edge of the doorframe. It cuts a deep gash across his cheeks. Mr. Yu turns to him. I see a flash of worry cross his eyes, and instead of shoving the young man back out of the store, he bends down to help him. "Steady," Mr. Yu says to the young man on the ground as he clutches his face and moans. "That's a nasty gash. I'll help you bandage it." But the young man whirls on Mr. Yu in a blind fury. Pressa sees the glint in the air at the same time I do. She screams and grabs her father to yank him away, even as he holds the bandages in his hand. I open my mouth and lunge in their direction. Neither of us reaches him in time. The young man's knife plunges deep into our father's stomach. Once, twice. Then I slam hard into the man and knock the knife from his hand. The weapon goes spinning to the floor as he and I both fall. Above me, Pressa grabs her father as he clutches his stomach, his watery eyes wide with shock. The young man struggles with me. He's surprisingly strong for his size, as if he were fighting for his life. Finally, I kick him off me hard enough to send him skidding against the wall. He hits his head and shakes it, dazed for a moment. Daniel sees the commotion and rushes over, but it's already too late. Press's father drops to his knees in the middle of his floor as people stream all around him, running to grab everything from his shelves. Mr. Yu's face has gone paper white and he's shaking uncontrollably. Between his fingers clutching his stomach seeps dark blood. "Dad!" Press is shouting at him as she helps him lean against the wall of his shop. She presses her hand against his leaking wounds too. Blood runs across her skin. "Dad!" She looks helplessly up at me. "Call an ambulance! Now!" But without the level system, there's no way to make a proper call to anyone. I dash out into the street in an attempt to grab the nearest police officer I see, but there are so many people in the streets, some shoving their way into other shops, others trying in vain to stop them. I run back in, bend down beside Mr. Yu, and strip off my thin jacket. Mr. Yu's eyes flutter weakly at me before they go to Pressa. His breaths come in irregular beats. He whispers something to her that sounds like he's telling her to get out of here. She ignores him and keeps trying to stop the flow of blood. I take Mr. Yu's hand and hold it tight. Before either of us can do any more, his eyes fade, the light in them dimming to nothing. His trembling stops. One of his hands clutches the bandages that he'd been ready to use to help his killer. They're stained red now. Press's hands are still pressed against her father's wounds. Around us, people stumble forward to the shelves to grab handfuls of herbs and powders, stepping over his body as if he were nothing more than an obstacle. I realize I'm tugging on Press's arm, telling her we have to leave. She tries to shake me off and go back to what she's doing. Only when June and Daniel join me do we finally manage to snap Pressa out of her reverie and start pulling her away from the store. Marin flees into the street and turns to watch helplessly as people overrun the store. Only then does Pressa break down in tears against me. I force my eyes away from the scene around us. No matter how strong the country, no matter how invincible one might seem, there is always a tipping point. Always something that can pull the entire house down.